Hello everyone, Ruslan Bailov here, and this is our daily analysis of the Ukrainian front. Today marks 2 years since the AFU invaded Russia's Kursk region. As the saying goes, a lot of water has flowed under the bridge since then. The war itself has changed significantly. The political dimension of the war has changed, and the technological side has changed a great deal too. Ukrainian citizens were initially very inspired by this. Finally, Ukrainian troops were on Russian territory. Now there'd be a seizure of Russian cities and so on. It was claimed that the AFU would seize part of Russian territory and later offer to trade it for something. But despite the first painful blow, Russian command quickly regrouped and got its bearings. Within a week, the first serious reinforcements began arriving in that direction, and the situation quickly moved into a static phase. From there, the situation gradually began to turn around, and the foothold the AFU had seized shrank considerably. Then came help from North Korea. Thousands of North Korean soldiers took part in this war, hundreds were killed, and Korean troops significantly helped the Russian army at the time, not just with infantry, but with ammunition and supplies as well. That adventure also ended badly for the AFU, with heavy losses. They lost 1,000 pieces of equipment and tens of thousands of soldiers. It feels as though Ukraine's population has essentially forgotten about all this. Judging by approval ratings that put Zelensky at around 50%, they want the war to continue. Zelensky supports continuing the war, which means the majority of the population apparently supports it too. Some dream of restoring the 1991 borders and so on. There are currently no signs the war will end. I think even over the next 2 or 3 years, things will largely continue as they are. Personally, I don't think the war can realistically end until the Russian army reaches the Dnieper in the Zaporizhzhia area, the city of Dnipro, and starts approaching Kiev from the east. Some say that even taking Kiev wouldn't end the war, that the capital would simply be relocated to Lviv and the fighting would go on. It's obviously far too early to make such forecasts, but the fact that the war will continue for a couple more years is close to a certainty. And incidentally, friends, history is repeating itself. Why? Because footage is once again appearing of North Koreans, DPRK fighters. And according to statements from Ukrainian intelligence, Russia is continuing to move more than 30,000 North Korean troops toward the Ukrainian border today in preparation for a new large-scale offensive. So as you can see, friends, the outcome of the invasion turned out to be a very sad one for the AFU. They never managed to reach the Kursk nuclear power plant. The AFU got bogged down somewhere in the border area and were eventually pushed out entirely. In the end, what the AFU achieved is that now, in northern Ukraine, the Russian army holds several footholds. The Glushkovo bridgehead in Sumy region, a second bridgehead near the city of Sumy itself, another at Kazachya Lopan, just east of it at Lukyantsy, then a larger bridgehead near Vovchansk, and one near Kupiansk as well, meaning the Ukrainian border in this area is increasingly coming under Russian army control. Kharkiv direction. Now let's move on to today's frontline review, starting with a small new bridgehead. A new settlement has come under Russian army control in the north, in Kharkiv region. A bit east of Kazachya Lopan, Russian forces crossed the border and took the settlement of Kindivka, along with half of Hoptivka. Both settlements sit along the N20 highway, which runs from the Russian city of Belgorod straight into Kharkiv, the most direct route into the city itself. From Hoptivka to the Kharkiv ring road is now only about 20 kilometers, not a great distance. We're waiting on objective control footage from this area. It looks like Russian command has set itself the goal of getting as close as possible to Kharkiv from the north. The front at Kazachya Lopan is advancing and will likely be cleared soon. If Russian forces manage to push even 10 kilometers deeper into Ukrainian territory here, that would be a major problem for Ukraine, since part of the roads inside Kharkiv itself would then fall within range of Russian FPV, first-person view drones, essentially able to roam that part of the city at will. We're also seeing a steady stream of footage here showing strikes on AFU strongpoints. Ukrainian army positions in this area are being ground down. Sloviansk direction. Now let's move to the Sloviansk direction. As you likely already know, Russian forces have entered the settlement of Mykolaiivka. It isn't marked on the map yet, but that happened a couple of days ago. We haven't received objective control footage from there yet. And as I've explained before, while a foothold is still being consolidated inside a town, nobody's going to expose their own positions on camera. But what we can clearly see is a large number of FPV drone strikes on identified AFU positions. Strikes are also being carried out daily with glide bombs. The soldiers and FPV operators currently holding out in Mykolaiv are in an unenviable position, with everything available being thrown at them. I expect within a few days we'll get a clearer picture of the situation inside the town. The Ukrainian side says it has begun evacuating civilians from Kramatorsk. These cities will soon be essentially empty. There will be almost no local residents left, since not much may remain of the cities themselves. The only scenario in which a city might come through with less damage is a rapid Russian breakthrough from the west or east, and in significant force. Barring that, daily damage to these cities is simply becoming routine in this kind of war. Zaporizhzhia direction. In Zaporizhzhia, the situation for the AFU is turning very difficult. As a reminder, two cities remain under AFU control here: Zaporizhzhia itself, the regional center, and the second largest, Kharkiv. In yesterday's episode, we discussed how Russian forces had already broken into the town from the south, via Novodanilivka, and had gained a foothold in the southern outskirts of Kharkiv, in the private housing sector, pushing into the town and attempting to establish themselves there fully. Today word came that a Russian reconnaissance sabotage group attempted to enter the town and was unsuccessful. We'll wait another couple of days to see whether Russian forces managed to gain a real foothold there or not. At the same time, the Russian Vostok force grouping continues to press toward the town from the northeast as well, and today improved its positions near the previously captured village of Lizna, cutting off a pocket there. In addition, the encirclement of the settlement of Dolinka continues. There has also been an advance in the Rivnopilia area, so the overall picture here is fairly clear. Russian forces are aiming to approach the town from the northeast as well, since that's the most reliable way to take Kharkiv. As has happened more than once in this war, logistics decide practically everything. Without solid logistics, the AFU inside a town weakens quickly, and it can be taken with far fewer losses and forces. That's the math currently at play. Today we also got some striking footage of Russian Su-34 fighter jets dropping glide bombs on Kharkiv, targeting the bridge connecting the two halves of the town, as Russian aviation tries to create maximum difficulty for the AFU inside the town. We're also seeing mass strikes on infantry positions and on tree lines sheltering FPV operators. Work here is proceeding at maximum intensity. A bit further west, Pavlivka has been marked as back under Russian army control. It's genuinely striking how quickly the Russian army has retaken this previously lost ground. The AFU had prepared well and pushed the front back 5 to 6 kilometers, but instead of digging in defensively, the Russian side quickly reclaimed almost all of it. Only in the settlement of Primorska have positions not yet been fully restored. It's quite possible Ukrainian forces lost the initiative here and simply ran out of steam. For some reason, they tend to exhaust themselves very quickly during offensives, most likely due to the infantry, which is reluctant to advance. Finding attacking infantry has become extremely difficult for the AFU these days, which is why across the entire front they remain largely on the defensive, gathering enough strength to counterattack only about once every 6 months or so, because sitting in defense for too long isn't good for morale either. Dnipropetrovsk direction. In the Dnipropetrovsk direction, the situation remains extremely difficult for the Russian side. Ukrainian forces are attempting to advance on several sectors. Fierce fighting continues along the entire line of contact, and an extensive grey zone persists in many areas. The AFU is applying the same infiltration tactics that the Vostok force grouping has used over the past 6 months, though without notable results. Repeated raids by small unattached units, aimed simply at marking a Ukrainian presence, allow AFU soldiers to maximize their apparent successes in the information space and force Russian command in this direction to spend additional resources rechecking settlements. At the same time, the thinned-out front line, a product of the expanding kill zone, doesn't allow either side to keep sufficient personnel at the forward edge, which both sides exploit to infiltrate small groups tens of kilometers into the opposing rear areas of engagement. On the eastern flank, AFU units are attacking around Ivanivka and the adjacent high ground, trying to establish themselves along the Tolstoy Zvezda line, using the terrain to approach Russian positions unseen. Near Podubna, Ukrainian assault groups also continue infiltrating around Iskra from the south. using several routes toward Mern and Voskresenka, with infantry moving in along tree lines under drone cover. A similar picture is unfolding near Ternov, where despite repeated strikes on Velika Mikhailivka, Havrilivka and Pidhavrilivka, AFU infantry continues sending small groups toward Berezove and Novohayhorivka. Around Novohryhorivka and Solodke, small Ukrainian groups also appear from time to time, some coming from the north, some from the west, though activity is gradually tapering off. In effect, a broad grey zone has formed in this direction, in which small groups try to destroy one another as quickly as possible. Russian forces currently hold the initiative in many sectors, but cannot afford to clear and recheck the same tree lines multiple times a day. And the AFU exploits that gap. Despite the constant elimination of these small groups, Ukrainian units keep forming new ones, drawing on their advantage in drone-based supply. The Ukrainian side still isn't able to seize and hold any real territory, instead trading personnel for time to slow the Russian advance. Though this may well be exactly the intermediate objective Ukrainian command currently has in mind. And here's something else worth flagging for you today, friends. As of August 5th, the European Union has stopped granting temporary protection to Ukrainian men of military age who left the country illegally. For example, those who crossed into Romania through the Carpathian Mountains without a valid exit stamp. Up to now, this route essentially guaranteed asylum and the right to stay in the EU. Now, if a man can't prove he crossed legally or that he's exempt from mobilization, temporary protection is off the table. No right to work, no benefits. He can only remain in the EU for 90 days out of every 180 on ordinary Schengen terms, and if he wants to apply for asylum, he'll have to do it through the standard pre-war procedure rather than the simplified wartime one. So let's call this what it is, friends. The European Union is effectively closing the door it left open for years and pushing men who don't want to fight straight back toward mobilization. For years, Brussels quietly tolerated, even welcomed, Ukrainian men slipping across the border, no questions asked. Now, with Kyiv struggling to find enough infantry for the front, that door is being shut, and the men who already made it out are the ones paying the price. Passports confiscated at the border in Romania, no legal status, no way to work, no safety net. It's hard to read this as anything other than the EU throwing these men back into the war machine to help plug Ukraine's manpower shortage. So, summing up, friends, the adventure the AFU launched 2 years ago, which caused real difficulties for the Russian side. Yes, it was painful. Yes, it was unexpected. Yes, North Korean troops had to be called in for help. But 2 years on, we can honestly assess that none of it ultimately helped the Ukrainian side hold back the Russian advance. And today, events at the front continue to unfold in Russia's favor. We'll keep watching the situation, friends. Thank you very much for your attention, dear friends.